So thank you everyone for joining today. We're going to go over Salesforce reporting and dashboarding. A few housekeeping items. So this call is recorded. We'll make sure to share it out with everyone afterwards. I also have some documentation that we'll share afterwards that will go along with it on some of the reports that we're going to go over, how to make sure to build them. We also have a dedicated team here, my solution architects team, that will sit down with you and build them as well in tandem with you or your ops team. The majority of this group are super senders. If you're not a super sender, reach out afterwards. We'll make sure we get you into the group. A big benefit there is we go over a lot of best practices, tips, and Leslie, who unfortunately can't make it, also sends a lot of our newest treats, direct vendor swag. So make sure you're part of it, as she tends to hook everyone up with a lot of good things. So really today we're going to be going over some of the reports that we recommend, our best practices on some of the fields we can push to give you good insights into who's sending, the pipeline bill, closed one, attribution, all of that fun stuff. I love chatting, as Julia knows. So if you guys do have questions as we go through, definitely come off mute, chat, throw it in the chat, whatever makes the most sense. So with that, we'll kind of start. Let me share my screen. So I'm sure most people here know what this portion is here. So this is where we're going to be able to do a lot of our Salesforce tracking. One thing that we've realized is a lot of people don't understand the additional fields that we're able to support. We are working on making these global settings so we can have this more of a default setting, but at the time being, this will be touch by touch. So I think that's an important thing, depending what the use case is or why we're creating that touch. What are the right fields that we want additional tracking in to make sure that we can pull these into the correct dashboards? So as far as reporting and our best practices, we always recommend one of two routes for Salesforce campaigns. First one's going to be including Sendoso in the naming convention of the campaign. That way, when we're building our dashboards or any of our reporting in the logic, we'll use Salesforce campaign name contains Sendoso. Or the second way is building a new campaign type. We see people going one of two routes. So you can make a new campaign type for direct mail and e-gifts, or making one for Sendoso as a whole. As we start going in here for our campaign tracking reporting, we have two options now. I don't know if anyone or everyone has seen our new campaign feature here. But the first one here is where you can go ahead and select a predetermined Salesforce campaign that's already been built. It's going to go ahead and pull in everything here. Or our new feature is we can actually have Sendoso create the Salesforce campaign and push it into Salesforce for you. So that's where you can create a campaign, call it whatever we want. So maybe it's going to be a Q2 or Q1 New Year send. Be able to pick the campaign start date. So obviously, if you're creating it, we're going to want that date to be today. If it's quarterly, yearly, you can pick when it ends. Here's where if you create that unique campaign type to either be Sendoso, direct mail, or e-gifts, you can click into it. The benefit of having ones that are built around Sendoso or direct mail is it's going to auto-populate campaign member statuses for you. So if we click direct mail, for example, it's going to auto-populate the campaign statuses for you, so you don't need to match those every single time. From here, the additional Salesforce activity, this is where we're going to stamp on that lead or contact record and updating where the status is. These obviously are customizable. If you don't care when they're confirming the address or processing, only when shipped and delivered, you can turn those off. We normally will recommend in campaigns too that responded for physical is going to be delivered. Responded is going to be for e-gifts will be redeemed. But one thing that we're going to dive a little deeper into is the field down here. Normally, if you look at it, it's closed. We're going to go ahead and open it up. There's a few additional things that we can start tracking. So the first one, if you guys are ever targeting, let's say, accounts in a healthcare space, government, anyone that has code of ethics or sunshine acts or things like that, where leads, contacts, or accounts can't receive over an X amount for the year, that's where we want to start tracking either on the recipient, the contact, or a lead. Since we here at Sendoso know the cost of the send, we'll continue to update that field every time a send has been completed, so you know exactly how much has been spent on that recipient. We then also have the ability for sends to say, right, if a lead or a contact or account has received over $50, over $100, it'll remove any sends from being able to be facilitated in that context. So you're not going over any of those dollar amounts that have been set up. This is something that will be done in the screen before this. So when we're in the touch details here, under additional details, here's where we can go ahead and limit the touch based on criteria. So here's where we say, right, do not display the send when an account or a contact Sendoso spend. Granted, we will need to create these fields in Salesforce, but here's like the total. So do not display if a contact's total spend is greater than, let's say 50. So now if we can see that, hey, they've received more than $50, that send is now removed, we can't send it. So that's something, once again, normally we see in healthcare, government, or any accounts that normally have any of those code of ethics. But as far as the next step here, the next thing that we always want to be doing is this field right here, total spent on campaign. So as a reminder, we are not a managed package, we're an OAuth integration, so we can read any custom fields. So normally the default field in Salesforce for campaigns is the actual cost. So here's where we're going to map this to the campaign. Then it's going to pull anything that you guys leverage in campaigns here. Like I said, the default here is actual cost in campaign, but if you use any custom fields, it is also going to show up. So once again, this is going to track everything as a whole for the campaign. So every time we do a send, we're going to update this one. And this is going to be important for ROI that we're going to show shortly. If a lot of your Sendoso sends are geared around SDRs or sales, we now have the ability to also create dashboards that are going to have more of a sense of a leadership dashboard. So for this one, what we're going to want to push is one of two things, either the sender's full name. Since we know who sent it, we're going to update a campaign member field to show it. So here's where we want to use the campaign member field. The object we recommend creating is going to be right here, sender's name. So now when the send's been completed, we're going to stamp who sent it in the campaign member. So we can now summarize from that, which I'll show you where that comes into place. If you guys have multiple sales teams, we can also then add an extra field as well. That's going to be showing the team name. So that's going to be found here at the bottom. Same thing here. We're going to push that to the campaign member. And then we're going to push it to the sending team name here. So that's where you can group by the different teams that are doing sends. So once we start having these set up, where does this come into play, right? So the first one we're going to do here is going to be an overall Sendoso dashboard. So what this is going to do, and there's a few things that are reliant, and hopefully everyone has it set up. If not, we do have workarounds. But the way that we're going to be able to report in these dashboards is that a lead or a contact, A, has received a Sendoso send, B, that lead or that contact is also attached to an opportunity. Once they're attached to an opportunity and they're living in one of the campaigns, we're going to be able to start automating and pushing this information live. So within here, we're going to be able to start showing the influence pipeline, the influence closed one, how many open opportunities have currently received a Sendoso send. From here, we're going to break down each campaign that are feeding into these overall numbers so you can start seeing which ones are being most effective. We can also start showing how many contacts are living within each campaign. As we showed here, the actual cost in campaign up here is where we're going to start showing our acquisition cost by campaign. So what we're going to be able to do here now is going to start showing that actual ROI tracking. So now when we hover over a campaign, we're going to be able to say, all right, for this coffee demo reminder, for example, we've sent $11,000 worth of these e-gifts, but we've put almost 2.4 million in pipeline. We've closed 1.5 million. On average, our acquisition cost by customers around 3,700. I will preface this is our demo Salesforce, so all this information is dummy. That's why hopefully you're not spending $3,700 per customer, but you'll start understanding the gist behind where we can really start showing every dollar you're spending, what it's bringing into new revenue. One thing I like to say is this is influence pipeline. This isn't attributed. So if you guys are using like a visible or full circle that's showing attribution, we could take it to the next level where we then create a new channel type for direct mail or Sendoso, and then we can start actually looking at true attribution if you guys are doing like a U-shape, a W, a custom attribution model, where we can then start breaking down, right, was this a first touch, op create, last touch, whatever it might be. and then we can make a little more detailed into the true attribution behind it. And then down here, we will also always start updating your top 5 performing campaigns. So these ones we know are the most effective. We might want to put more budget into them. Ones that we're seeing maybe aren't performing as well. I did just work with a customer where they actually made a top 5 worst performing, where they were trying to understand, is it the messaging? Is it the audience? Is it what type of gift we're sending? So they can start making a lot of those changes. From here as well, we can start comparing different marketing channels. Obviously, no direct mail works. That's why it's a higher closing than any other channel here. And then you can also start comparing kind of the acquisition cost for each of those channels as well. As far as what I was mentioning, some of those fields, that's where you're going to want to work with your ops team to either create the sender's name, the sender's team. So the way that that's going to look, if we're looking at a campaign member, this is Kale, our dedicated solution architect here. His company is Kale's Kale, so I guess he sells a lot of vegetables. But here's where we're going to want to push that sender's name field. So now every time a send's been completed, Sendoso is going to grab that leader contact. We're going to put them into the campaign for branded cupcakes, and then we're going to push, once again, the sender's name to that field so we understand who sent it. So as we start having a lot of these in here, from here, what we're going to be able to do now is start building some of the actual team-specific dashboards. So in here, for example, we can start building a report, and what the report's going to look like. Here is the same thing that I was mentioning. We'll go ahead and edit this one. So we're going to filter it by the sender's name, so we can start summarizing exactly who's done the sends. We want to make sure that there's an opportunity that's attached to that campaign. So most of the reports we're building up here are going to be campaigns with influence opportunities. If you guys have a different structure, that's where we normally sit down and we'll understand how you guys do things today. But within here, we're going to create a new filter as well that we want the Salesforce campaign name to contain Sendoso, or if we're going the route for campaign type, we're going to say campaign type contains direct mail, Sendoso, e-gift, however we're going to route that. What I also recommend is adding a chart in here. So as we start having those different campaigns and the charts, we're now going to start being able to pull in exactly every single person. So this one, for example, is our SDR board. So you can see here, right? We have 6 SDRs currently on the platform. Leslie currently has started to build 100K in pipeline. Chris, our co-founder, not using it the best. He's at 28K, but we can start really breaking down who's exactly sending. From here, what I did, so I actually came from being a customer. This is one that we did where we would then reward our top SDR. Every month, we'd go through, hey, how are you prospecting? How are you tying Sendoso into your day-to-day sends and activities? But from here, once again, we can see how much pipeline they've built. We can also see how much closed pipeline they've built. So, hey, out of the pipeline you have here, here's actually what's been closed. We can then start doing opportunity progression as well. So we can say, all right, a Sendoso send has been sent. From here, there's now been an opportunity created. So we can start understanding exactly how many opportunities have been created from those sends. And then I like to show visually charts where you can also then grab the same report here. You don't need to rework it, but start understanding which ones are working. You can then drill into it, see what campaigns, what sends have been sent, and then same for the closed one pipeline here. So I guess as far as what we've covered so far, any questions that have come up? Do you guys do things differently? You kind of want to make this more of a conversational piece.
And we are asking for these fields to be created. So let me just preface this with, I'm back in Jurassic Park in terms of like even having access to these report types. So when we're asking sales ops to create some of these fields, like the sender name, for example, they'll create a field, but then like it will only map to one object. Like I have to very much ask for every single thing I need that field to do. So would you say that there are certain report types we should ask that field to be available to be pulled into and like just map it to lead and contact, or are there specifics you would give us for that?
That's a very great question. So yes, so I will share with everyone as well. We've started to build our kind of reporting here of, hey, here's the actual report type. This is the report name of what we're trying to track, the logic we recommend, some notes, and then we actually have videos for it. Cool. But as far as kind of like the sender's name and things like that, I'm in the middle of just finishing that, so I should have it done today.
Okay.
But what we're going to want to push is two fields ideally. Sender's name, sender's team, and then the field itself is going to be a text field. So that way we just push in the actual name. Normally there's one or two, it's a text or a pick list. We don't need, we're afraid that if there's a pick list and that SDR is not added to that pick list, it's not going to work. So we would just go off the pick list value. And then when we create the campaign, we can just say, right, contains SDR or contains our SDR's names. And then as we get more SDRs, they're going to auto-populate into there.
Okay, thank you.
But I'll make sure to share this with everyone. We have one for Lightning. We also, if you're still Jurassic and in Classic, we have one for Classic as well. And hopefully everyone here is in Lightning. I think they've forced everyone into it by now.
I have a quick question. This is Gwen. On the field mapping, I noticed that there was an option for the leads, the total spend for leads and contacts, but also recipient. Would you use like either recipient or lead and contact? Or would you, what situation would you use all of them?
Yeah, great question. So normally what we'll see if we're doing a campaign, so normally we see on the sales side, we want it towards recipient because your team might be sending to a lead to get them to convert to a contact. If we're knowing that this is a dedicated one, let's say for CX side, where we know they're already a customer, they're already a lead, or a contact and no lead should be getting it, that's where you can do a lead. But I'd say 95% of the time we see it total cost on recipient and then just pushing to the campaign member. That way it's a catch-all for leads and contacts.
Okay, great. And then would that update in the future if they were part of other campaigns, or is it just one time for the recipient?
Yeah, so it'll continue to accrue. So if they're in, let's say, 3 different campaigns, every time they got a new send, it would just add on top of it. So if the first one was a $25 door opener, the second one was a welcome gift for $50, it would then start showing $75. But I will say it also depends. So if we're pushing it, so I guess there's 2 options here. So the recipient's always going to be pushed to just the campaign member field. But if we're doing on the contact and lead, this is going to be everything historically. So that's where you might actually want both of them. So here's where we could push it to like that contact field and do total Sendoso spend. So every time that they get any sends throughout their life cycle, we're going to continue to add that cost. If I can find where this field is, we have too many. So for example, here's where we could do both. So we could track it on the actual unique campaign of the cost. So we can track just for that unique campaign. But if we want to track everything, that's where we can push it to both. That way we can ensure that we're not overspending, oversending, things like that.
Very cool. Thank you for clarifying.
Of course. Any other questions? I know we have 45 minutes. I don't know if we'll take the full 45. But one other thing as well that I like to discuss too is obviously I think maybe a lot of you in marketing. So that's where we also will really recommend the team name as well. So if we know that this is a dedicated marketing one, we can then make sure that marketing is getting stamped for these sends. So we can also then start creating marketing dashboards. So I was working with a customer a couple of weeks ago. We built a CX dashboard that was really focused on CSAT. And understanding, do we have a higher score? And they built 2 graphs side by side, one that received a Sendoso send, one that didn't, and we can start seeing the delta. So they're tracking CSAT, activated users, and then also renewals. So from the CX side, we can start tracking a lot of those. Hey, do we have a higher, once again, CSAT retention rate if they've received a Sendoso send throughout the journey compared to not? And then also a marketing one where we can start comparing. So one of the customers, they do a lot of webinars and events, and they did some A/B testing. So they compared, hey, we sent a Sendoso send before a webinar, and then we did some without. And they had, I think it was an increase of about 17% of those that registered attended when they actually received a Sendoso send. But then also kind of the follow-up from that event, they use a trigger. If a campaign member status moved to attended opposed to registered, they sent a gift as a thank you. And they were able to progress those opportunities. So that's where we can also start branching out and having more of a sales leadership board, a CX, a marketing, then one catch-all to really start breaking down exactly each department's usage of Sendoso and how it's benefiting each of those teams' KPIs. And those are all things that I love getting in the weeds too. So if that's any things that you want to dig deeper into, my email is just jerry@sendoso.com. Always happy to sit down, understand how you guys do reporting today, and then how can we emulate that for Sendoso to start really showing the ROI behind everything. I think that's one thing as well. I was a speaker at a session and my counterpart was talking about retention being the new acquisition in today's market. So I think that's also a big shift of understanding how is Sendoso really helping with those retention conversations, with renewals, upsells, cross-sells, things like that. Because it actually will cost your company more money today to lose a customer than you're actually spending to gain a new customer. So that's where I know a lot of people want to know, like, show us net new business and things like that, but also how are we really using this to reward good behaviors internally. We've done a lot of reporting, and we've noticed that the first 90 days of being a new customer is actually going to show the biggest insights into whether you're going to renew. So we've also started nurture tracks and things like that to reward the behaviors we know that are going to lead to that renewal. So those are all things we can automate in Salesforce and then start showing in these dashboards the impact of a lot of those progressions as a customer. Any other questions, thoughts, things you want to dig deeper into? If not, we could wrap up a little early and give everyone some time back. Like I said, if you want to sit down and go through a lot of this reporting, shoot me an email. It's just jerry@sendoso.com. I can also send you our reports as far as the different dashboards to build, the fields logic we recommend. And like I said, our team's always happy to sit down, do some audits on your reporting, things that we're tracking. A great thing as well, if you guys today don't have a lot of these fields mapped today, we can sit down and start mapping all of these, and then we could retroactively push everything back into these fields so we're not missing anything historically. So we can catch up on the year, the quarter, whatever it might be, to be able to start showing a lot more of this data and information for your team. All right. Well, I appreciate everyone for joining. Like I mentioned, we'll go ahead and send all this as a follow-up as well. It'll either come from myself or Leslie. If you guys want to dig deeper, let us know. We're always here to help make sure you guys are as successful using Sendoso as possible.